For most of sports history, performance was estimated. Speed was judged by eye. Trajectory argued over after the fact. Launch monitor technology changed that. At the center of this shift was FlightScope.
And once again, here's a look at that FlightScope.
FlightScope machine that measures all the details.
Practice with a purpose.
FlightScope Mevo. You want to give it a try?
And Mevo Plus gives you 5 courses, target games, and more right out of the box.
Tip of the cap to FlightScope. They are giving us so much information.
Golf, tennis, baseball, cricket, and athletics. Launch monitors made motion measurable and captured in real time with scientific precision. What athletes once felt, they could now see. What coaches once guessed, they could now prove. This shift didn't just add data to sport. It changed how sport understands performance itself. As the technology evolved, measurement moved beyond elite labs and professional venues. It entered training facilities, academies, and everyday practice environments. Decisions became repeatable. Progress became trackable. FlightScope defined how modern sport measured performance, and for the first time, could be engineered, not just trained. This is the story behind the man who started it all.
I'm Henri Johnson. I am the founder and the CEO of FlightScope. I studied electronic engineering at the University of Stellenbosch, just over the hill here. And I did my master's degree in signal processing. I had a grant from what's called IMT, Institute for Maritime Technology. So I started working at Simonstown, in Simonstown, and I had a beautiful office overlooking the ocean. So I even saw a whale giving birth. It seemed surreal at the time. So it was beautiful, it was fantastic, everything, but it was corporate and that was not my style. I got an offer from a company in Durban, UEC, that literally doubled my salary, and I went up there and it looked fantastic, and I just realized that even if I take that position, I would never do what I wanted to do. I wanted to do my own thing. I had a vision, and it just felt to me that the corporate environment was just way too slow and regulated for me as a wild young engineer that had a dream. At the time, I did windsurfing, speed sailing, slalom competitions, and we built windsurfers just for fun. I'm an electronic engineer, but we also I did a design on an inverted V speedboard, which at that time held the South African record, not with me on it, but with somebody else on it at least. So I understood quite a bit of aerodynamics, which then translated into, also planing hulls with windsurfers. And people thought I was going to build windsurfers when I resigned, but actually that wasn't the thing. I was just looking for something that I wanted to do. I didn't know what I was going to do. I literally resigned. I got an opportunity to develop some electronics for a company, Centralized Electronics at the time. They had a defense contract. But at that time, they were in the boom of defense work, and so they got a lot of funding and never delivered really much, and that bothered me. And I was on this project, and at some point I said to the company, they gave me some shares to stay on and whatever, and I just said to them, listen, we can't do that. We have to really deliver something if we get the money. And they were just laughing it off, and I decided to resign, but I negotiated to actually take over the contract in exchange for my shares. We did that, and I had a contract to fulfill with no money, and the contract value at the time was like 37,000 Rand. In today's terms, it's $2,500, not a lot of money. And I was alone. I did everything by myself. There was one lady that worked with me, and she did procurement, and we started the company. And I actually did everything. I developed electronics, I did the radar modules, I did the signal processing, all the software, and I actually demonstrated the product within a few months. The defense industry fell on its back very shortly after that. It was just before Nelson Mandela came on board, and South Africa was excluded from the world stage in terms of especially defense markets. So defense market literally died for me at the time, and I had to find something else. So that's how it started, and that was my introduction to, the real world in trying to make money and survive. Okay, so initially the company was just called EDH, which was just the name I thought out in 30 seconds, like Electronic Development House. And we started making defense systems. But within a few years, we actually had a tracking radar that could track a 155 millimeter projectile for 25 kilometers. And we also then helped Overberg Test Range. They had a huge Israeli system. So the huge radar from Overberg Test Range, they had a 0.9 degree beam width. Now, if you think about this, 0.9 degree is really small. Let's say it's 1 degree, it's less than 1 degree. So if you look on a clock, 1 minute is what, 6 degrees? Now, it gives you an idea of how small that beam is in 3D space. Now, they had a problem. They couldn't lock onto the projectile quickly enough because these projectiles would run at 1,000 meters a second. And so they couldn't move that huge radar into position quickly enough. And our radar measured it for the first 25 kilometers, but we could bring them locking onto the target within 0.7 seconds. So that was I would say, a nice achievement. We built a lot of what's called muzzle velocity radars at the time. For this Navy, UK, Australia, Singapore, and so on. So we did the one thing after the next, but the market was still small. And then came cricket. I was contacted by an engineer. They had a consulting company, Brian Mulligan, at the time, here in Cape Town. He was asked by Skalk Burger, rugby player, big Skalk, not small Skalk. He was actually part of MegaPro marketing at the time. Then Skalk spoke to me and said, okay, I hear you could possibly do something for cricket, for bowling. And I said, sure, we can. And within 3 months, we had a system at Newlands on TV, and they were sponsored by Gillette Speed Stick at the time. And although we called the product Speed Ball, guess what it was called? Speed Stick. So everybody spoke about Speed Stick, and Skalk really helped us. MegaPro helped us, and they introduced us to the Australian counterparts, into England, sports and outdoor media. And I still remember, spending time in Australia. My daughter she just became 1 year. She was 1 year, and my wife flew with us, and we went to Australia all the way, and at MCG at Melbourne. I literally wrote software on the plane because the sports marketing company didn't have the right protocol to take in any data at the time. So they were going to type in the data, and I said, no, wait, we can connect this up and you can just get the data into your system. So they didn't know how, and I got it working within a few hours when I was there, and that's how cricket came about. And so that was how we saw the opportunity of doing something automated in sport, because in the previous years they had some police speed guns that they used for measuring speed, but it's always been inaccurate. It's been apparent speed, and that's a whole different subject. Apparent speed versus actual velocity, huge difference. In cricket, it was more for, I would say, spectator, I would almost say education, giving people an idea of how good these athletes were, the bowlers in that case. I spent a lot of time with Alan Donald and those boys, and I remember Alan Donald saying to me in the nets at Wanderers, he said, I think I can throw faster than I can actually bowl. And I said, I don't think so. And he said, I can. And I tested him, and he tried his very best. And there's a very simple thing about physics there, and it's because the length of the delivery of the arm and how the wrist flicks at the very last moment. So it's like a driver versus a pitching wedge. You think you can do this fast, but if you use the full length of your arm and extension, and you've got to the last flip of the wrist, that produces the most speed easily. He was quite amazed by that. But so that was, I would say, one of the first athletes that really realized the value of data, because he had a belief system, fantastic athlete, and he was always working within a certain range. He could do much more, but he was doing something within his optimum that he intuitively knew, but he had a misconception about ability. And with data, he actually changed his opinion. Normally much more excited while I was working on the project because I realized what it could do, what it was going to do. At the time when it was then deployed, it was very, very tense because it had to work. You know, first ball, you're sitting there and just praying that the results will come on the board. And like it happened at Lord's one day, I was invited into the box, you know, with all the media and whatnot, and the very first ball didn't show up. Somebody snuck and ran behind the screens and tripped over a wire and pulled out the comms wire from the radar. So everybody was looking at me like, you know, and then everything changed from excitement into blame. And I just said, I'll handle it. Give me a few minutes space. I'll report back to you. And I went away, came back, everything was sorted. But so there was always the joy, of course, of seeing the technology work, but it always came with a lot of, I would say, personal responsibility that I took, and I wanted to really make sure that things worked well. And I think that it drove up the ante. It was tense. So the enjoyment was normally not during the game. It was almost before the game because I realized what it could do. And then game time, it was focus time. It's like exam time. You are happier when it's done than when in the moment. We had an opportunity to develop our initial FlightScope for an indoor golf simulator company that started up about golf at the time. And that gave us quite a nice production volume until they decided to sidestep us and do their own thing. But that happened in about 2006. So we had a good run of about 4 years with them. And then we still didn't think that this was really going to be a big endeavor in the world. Only in 2008, when I decided to go to America, put up office there, take a few people along, and definitely not in that year. I didn't think that we were, you know, on the brink of making something big. It was only in 2016 when I started with the Mevo, the small consumer unit, and we had no idea of how the consumer business worked. I started seeing the light. I must then also go back in the year 2000 when before I had the first unit, I just had a prototype of FlightScope. We had a video made where I actually had the vision, and we actually, in that video, we showed a potential consumer device one day that people could use on a smartphone. At the time it was a Palm Pilot with an antenna, but it was the idea that we could go there. So that was the vision, kind of futuristic at the time, but I didn't see or feel that during the journey. It was tough. So when we started seeing the response to the consumer unit, the Mevo, we call it Mevo 1, we realized that that was an opportunity that we needed to chase down. So it took quite a while to get there. My best engineer at the time said to me, this will never work. I remember we were down here at Vodacom Village, driving range, and we did some measurements. We looked at the data, and he said, this will never work. And I said, why do you say so? And he said, well, we won't be able to use the data, the raw measurements. And I said, we are going to make it work. I intuitively knew what was possible, and we just took it one step at a time. So we got there. Another challenge was, you know, Armscor Radar, a big armaments corporation in South Africa, their head of radar basically said to me, this will never work. A ball is made of plastic. You can't see plastic with a radar. Very little did he know that he could actually even see compressed air from a pellet gun without a bullet. You can actually measure the shock wave with the same radar. So I actually measured a shock wave from a pellet gun without the pellet in it. You can actually see this, the shock wave is compressed air, and it's moving at 331 meters per second. It of course disappears quickly, but radar is amazing in what it can do. So that was some of the technical challenges, but I would say moreover, the technical challenges was just to get it going and working. The biggest challenge was not the technology and making it work. The biggest challenge was adoption of new technology within any market. There's an inertia that governs how people react to new technology being introduced into a market. They don't have the frame of reference to understand the value for them at the time. Even if you say the words, there's no connection. So it took a long time for people to understand. In South Africa, we had somebody going around trying to sell one of the FlightScopes at the time, and the people said, oh, what does it do? Like measure club head speed? No, we do more. And we told them, and they were like, so what? It's literally that was the biggest problem, not the technical one, it was the inertia in the market. So when we decided to go to the US, I had Silicon Valley in mind, maybe, even Texas, Atlanta. We even looked at Minnesota for some strange reason. There were some people that were involved with us in the tennis business, but never Orlando. It wasn't even, within my thinking. We went to the golf shows, of course, from 2004 right through. We've never skipped a year until now. And Orlando was just Disney World and the PGA Golf Show. So at a show, somebody came to me. It was actually in 2008, the beginning of the year. And an ex-colleague that worked with me at the Institute for Maritime Technology, he just rocked up there and he said, hey, good to see you here. And I said, Gary, what are you doing here? He said, I live here. And I said, no, come on, we're in Disney World. So he said, no, come to my office and I'll show you my house and whatever. And I looked at it and I said to my wife, you know what, we should consider this. You can actually live here in this area. The very first FlightScope that we did was pretty good. But where we are today, from an engineering point of view, we are light years ahead in terms of the capability, the details that we learned. You don't know what you don't know yet. You have to go through that journey. There are many things that we don't talk about in detail of the technology. I would say that it's really difficult to explain the detail without going into the engineering. I have to kind of focus now on what do people see different. So I think a thing that we did initially was just to offer up everything on a buffet. Like, here's some data, what can you do with it? And we started teaching people what you could potentially do with that. And I'm not so sure if that was the right way. We are definitely on another track now where the system now will be able to help you to help yourself so that you can achieve your goals. So that's where we are focusing on now. And I think we've come a long way, and we've always stayed on top of technology. We were the first to bring in wireless, even connection within the systems. Then we brought in an iPad. And I remember our competitors saying, oh, that'll never work. That won't actually be popular. They had a PC and everything like that. And today everything's mobile. So FlightScope has done a bunch of world firsts. I mean, I'm talking about a lot. I literally have to go and write down a few pages of world firsts that we've done in technology, products, and so on. So it's come a long way. In defense, our systems had to be measured and qualified to be within 0.02% of actual in terms of verification systems. Now, 0.02%, that is extremely accurate. So we know how to make accurate systems. And so we come from that engineering background. That's who we are, that's our DNA. And we try to bring that to the consumer. Does it matter? Yes, accuracy does matter. People enjoy accurate representation, measured or otherwise, so that they can use that for, comparing themselves on a leaderboard, get a stake in the ground so they can, improve in the future, and so on. So I think when it comes to accuracy, we not only promise accuracy, that's part of our brand. And our brand promise is exactly that. So we're going to do our best to be as accurate as possible so that you can trust our data. It's an interesting question. And this comes back to, I would say, who I am and what makes me tick. So, of course, I'm thankful for what I have done, could have done as well. I'm never complacent about, achievements, and I'm normally almost a little shy, to go on stage and say, hey, and we've accepted quite a few awards, TT 100 and so on, a few times. And at the time, it's like graduation. When you get a public award like that, it's nice. I tend to relax then, really, and think back and just enjoy the moment. So on a public platform, with a formal award, that's a nice experience. It's relaxing, and it gives perspective not only to other people but also to myself, to just review the process, and also people that helped me, because I know that this is a team effort in most cases, and of course I'm the pioneer, I know that, but I accept that as a responsibility more as an achievement. So for me, I'm not the kind of person that love to go on stage. I like to get the job done, and it's really great for me to see when people enjoy the innovations that we came about with, and so on. But the feeling, I would say it's a complex feeling. It's, on the one hand, it's also simple on the other hand. Why do I say that? Complex in the sense that there are moments where you can sit back and appreciate and take a view. But during your exam time, there's no time for that. People have asked me many times, so what's next? Is there something, can you do anything more in this space? And yes, I have a vision. And a vision normally isn't a perfect painting. It's a landscape and a dream, aspiration, and I normally try to work it back from, I want to be there for the company, I want the company to be there, and how do I get there? I don't worry about where I am now. I kind of work my way back like a maze. The perfect solution for the maze is to work it from the back, and then you know the road. And that's not cheating. That's visualization. That's, by the way, it's a very, very good principle for achievement. So where am I going to take the company? My vision for FlightScope is that within the next 10 years, we will be a major player in data science for sport and for athletes in the world. Things have changed to the degree that people don't even know what's going to happen within the next 3 years with AI and all. What we are going to bring to the table within the next year, I think will blow people away. So we've got some very exciting things on the table, and I'm excited. What we have found throughout the history of FlightScope is that when anybody tries a FlightScope, uses a FlightScope, things change. Because it's tangibly different. So FlightScope, and I think it comes more or less from my, I would almost say, humble approach, because I'm not somebody that likes to show off, brag, and so on. So I think what I'd like people to experience is just to give it a try. And once they've tried FlightScope, they will be happy. And I think what is tangible as well is when people get into the FlightScope family as a client. They experience that feeling of being included in a family, because we take care of them the best we can. We try as hard as we can so you can speak to someone, because that's one of my biggest frustrations with my Tesla. I can't speak to anyone. I have to just work through emails sometimes and just chats and so on, and it takes forever and it's frustrating. Where as a company and a brand, we want to interact with people. I believe that people need people, and as far as we can, we're gonna really focus on maintaining that family feeling. And it's not only about family. As I said, accuracy matters for us a lot. So the entire product design is extremely complex, and I've always said that we need to try and emulate Apple, and that's been a wish more than an aspiration, because in practice to get there is extremely difficult. And just the communication between myself, what I see, what I would like to see for our company, and how that's implemented down the line, because we're a team, we've got lots of people. We've got people in Poland writing the apps and software, language barrier, cultural barriers, and then, you know, how information is distilled down and latches onto their frame of reference. It's difficult. So that's been one of our biggest challenges, was to consolidate and actually get to the point where I'm saying, now that's exactly how I want it. I get this right with the actual hardware. Our radar is amazing. I mean, we've just now tested a new radar yesterday, which I've said to my engineers that this is the most accurate system we've ever made, just from an engineering point, and it feels good. The biggest challenge now is to actually translate that into the entire experience for a client, so that the client would not only appreciate the accuracy, but would appreciate the entire user experience. Now, that is a very, very difficult thing. I have a very particular way of thinking about that. It's a challenge to get there, but we have plans of how to get there quicker and better. So we're working on creating, you know, the necessary infrastructure so that we can achieve that in a better way. In early 2008, I decided that we had to open an office in the US. I was really settled in South Africa. I lived at Erenvale. My daughter was in a wonderful school. We had a nice rhythm. You know, Techno Park, Stellenbosch, everything was fantastic. And then everything changed. Firstly, in my own company, people said, this will never work, another crazy idea from Henri. I heard that, you know, through the channels. And that wasn't very satisfying to hear in a moment where I needed support. So in a moment where I needed support, I actually almost felt dissent within my own company. And that's a difficult thing to take along, because the people closest to you, if you don't have the support, then if you go ahead and follow your own dream or instinct, it almost feels counterproductive because you're unsure. So there was a little bit of, I would say, not only dissatisfaction, but almost anxiety that crept in, and I had to handle that. And then the move to the States, it was aggressively different. US, fantastic opportunity, never regret that. But still, it's only my wife, myself, and my daughter in the US. All our family is here, all our friends are here. This is my culture, these are my people, and I've got great friends in the US. And it's a fantastic opportunity, and I'll be forever thankful, not only for myself, my family, and for the company that we've gone there, but personally, it's been a huge sacrifice for me to literally go from here, and it's now almost 18 years. August next year, it will be 18 years. And time, you know, flies, doesn't seem a minute. But that has been, I would say, one of the biggest sacrifices for me, was to go and totally out of my comfort zone, establish something in a country and systems that I didn't really understand. I would say the first thing you need to do is to relax and watch Ted Lasso on Apple TV. And there's this particular message in there. And for those that read the Bible, you also find it in there. You have to believe. It's okay to fear. Fear is fine. Anxiety is not good, but disbelief is the worst. And you need to believe. And believe means that you're going to trust despite what you see in terms of the facts around you. It's easy to trust when the facts support. You know, like Reagan said in the old days, trust but verify. Now that's cool if you can, But when you're an innovator and you want to start your own company, the facts don't always support your dream. And that means you need to keep on believing despite the facts. And that means resilience. And you need to stick it out. And that means, in Afrikaans we say vastbyt. There's not a better word than that. And it just means that you need to toughen up, face the music, and if you fail, that's just one attempt that didn't work, which you can put aside, but then you can try a new one. I spend a large amount of time every day and mostly at nights studying, trying out new things. I'm extremely curious. So you can easily trip me by asking me a question or giving me a challenge. I'm all over it. So I'm extremely curious. I like to help people. So if you really want my attention, just tell me it can't be done. Then at least what you're going to trigger is, it's not that I want to show you, you've triggered a curiosity, because you must have a reason why you say it can't be done. And I normally want to understand why people say this can't be done. And what are they missing? Am I missing something? And hey, sometimes, it can't be done, but I just haven't found that one yet.